Welcome to Midnight Sleep Chronicles. Tonight, we are going somewhere no ordinary journey takes you. Not because it is far, though it is the most remote place on Earth. Not because it is cold, though it is colder than Mars on a summer day. We are going somewhere that requires special permission just to visit. Somewhere that 7 nations carved up between themselves and then, in 1959, quietly agreed to freeze, not just in ice, but in time. Somewhere where compasses stop working, where the rules of the surface world do not apply. We are going to Antarctica, the last continent, the most hidden continent, the only place on Earth that has never had a native human population in all of recorded history. And yet the place that humanity has always known was there. Tonight, you will do what governments permit only with extraordinary conditions. You will enter the forbidden zone at the bottom of the world, not by ship, not by icebreaker, not with a letter of authorization from a research institution. You will enter through sleep, through the deep, quiet place where the rules dissolve and the ice opens. By the time this journey ends, you will have traveled farther from the ordinary world than most people ever go. And you will have asked a question that no satellite image, no official expedition report, no press release has ever fully answered. What is Antarctica actually keeping from us? Let your body settle now. Let the weight of the day release. We have a long way to go, and the ice has been waiting long enough. Act 1. Reality. Antarctica is not just cold. It is not just remote. It is structurally wrong. It is the 5th largest continent on Earth, larger than Europe, larger than Australia. It holds 90% of all the freshwater ice on our planet, and 70% of all the fresh water that exists anywhere. If it melted entirely, sea levels would rise by 60 meters. Every coastal city on Earth would disappear. And yet, Antarctica itself sits at the bottom of the world, in almost total geological silence. No earthquakes shake its depths the way they shake other continents. No tectonic drama announces its presence. It simply sits, enormous, quiet, and old. Geologists estimate that the East Antarctic ice sheet has been continuously frozen for at least 34 million years. The ice at its deepest points is older than most human civilizations, by a factor so large it becomes almost meaningless to compare. In the ice cores drilled from its depths, scientists have found air bubbles, actual trapped samples of the atmosphere, that are over 800,000 years old. When you breathe near those cores, you are breathing next to air that was sealed before our ancestors had language. The continent beneath the ice is something else entirely. Using ice-penetrating radar and gravitational anomaly mapping, scientists have now built a picture of the land that lies under all that frozen weight. What they found is not the smooth, flat bedrock you might imagine. Under Antarctica is an entire hidden world. Mountain ranges, valleys, lakes, rivers, geological formations of extraordinary age. The Gamburtsev mountain range sits entirely beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. It is the size of the European Alps. It has never been seen by human eyes. It has never been touched. And the puzzling thing, the thing that geologists still debate, is that it should not be there. Mountain ranges form through tectonic collision, through continental plates grinding together with unimaginable force. But the Gamburtsev Mountains sit in a region of ancient, geologically stable rock that has not experienced significant tectonic activity for hundreds of millions of years. How mountains of this scale formed here, in this place, is genuinely not understood. Below the ice, there are also volcanoes. In 2017, a comprehensive survey identified nearly 140 volcanoes buried beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet, 91 of which had never been described before. Some reach over 3,500 meters in height. They are active. The ice above them is thin in places, and the heat that rises from below keeps the base of the glacier liquid, creating rivers and lakes in total darkness, in total isolation, that have never interacted with the surface world. The ice is not just ice. It is a seal. In 1957, a Soviet scientist named Andrei Kapitsa was doing seismic surveys in the interior of Antarctica. He was measuring the thickness of the ice. Standard work, routine. But the readings he was getting from one particular region didn't make sense. The ice kept bouncing sound waves back in a way that suggested something liquid underneath. Not ice, not rock, water. It took 36 years for the technology to confirm what Kapitsa had found. In 1993, satellite radar finally gave scientists a clear image of what lay beneath the Russian research station at Vostok, one of the coldest inhabited places on Earth, where temperatures regularly drop to minus 89 degrees Celsius, beneath 4 kilometers of ice, a lake, not a small one. Lake Vostok is the size of Lake Ontario, one of the Great Lakes of North America. It is up to 900 meters deep. Its water temperature sits just below freezing, held liquid only by the immense pressure of the ice above it. And it has been sealed from the surface world for somewhere between 15 and 25, the million years. In February of 2012, after decades of drilling, Russian scientists finally broke through to the surface of Lake Vostok. The water that rose up into the drill hole was the first contact between that ancient lake and the atmosphere in millions of years. When scientists analyzed the samples, they found life, not fossil life, not remnants of something long extinct, living organisms, and among them, one that matched nothing in any scientific database on Earth. The team leader, Sergei Bulat, of the St. Petersburg Nuclear Physics Institute, described it simply: unidentified and unclassified. A bacterium whose DNA was less than 86% similar to any known organism, a threshold that, in scientific terms, means something completely new. Something that had been evolving in total isolation, in complete darkness, under crushing pressure, with no sunlight, no nutrients from the surface, no connection to the living world above. For longer than our entire genus has existed, they have not yet fully explained what it is. Lake Vostok is not alone. There are estimated to be over 400 subglacial lakes beneath Antarctica, connected in places by rivers that flow in permanent darkness under kilometers of ice. A 2021 expedition drilled down 500 meters into an ice shelf above a river that had never been touched. They expected empty water. Instead, they found small crustaceans, amphipods, darting through the darkness in an ecosystem that had no reason to exist. The ice is full of secrets, not metaphorically, literally. Here is a strange fact. Antarctica was officially discovered in 1820. The first confirmed sighting of the continent came from a Russian naval expedition led by Fabian von Bellingshausen in the first weeks of that year. But in the 4th century BC, more than 2,000 years before Bellingshausen, the Greek philosopher Aristotle proposed that a large, unknown landmass must exist at the bottom of the world. He had never seen it. He had no ships capable of reaching it. He had no maps. He had only logic. The Greeks understood that the Earth was a sphere. They called the northern sky Arctos, the bear, after the constellation Ursa Major that dominates northern skies. And they reasoned that if there was an Arctos at the top of the sphere, there must be an Antarctos at the bottom. They named the unknown southern land Antarctos. They were right. For 2,000 years, mapmakers drew a hypothetical continent at the bottom of their maps. They called it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. They drew it huge, sprawling across the bottom of the globe. They had no data, only the conviction that the geometry of the world demanded it. Then, in 1929, a German theologian cataloging manuscripts in the Topkapi Palace Library in Istanbul found something unusual in an old bundle of parchment. It was a map drawn on gazelle skin, dated to 1513, created by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis. The map showed South America in remarkable detail for the time. It showed Africa. It showed the Atlantic Islands. And at the bottom of the map, it showed a coastline, a southern landmass, stretching east and west in roughly the position of Antarctica. 307 years before Antarctica was officially discovered. In 1965, Professor Charles Hapgood of the University of New Hampshire studied the map carefully with his students. What they found deepened the mystery. The coastline depicted on the Piri Reis Map appears to show Antarctica not as it looks today, buried under kilometers of ice, but as it might look without ice. The shape of the subglacial rock beneath the ice, revealed only by 20th century radar technology, shows similarities to what was drawn in 1513. Piri Reis himself wrote notes on his map. He described using many sources, including documents that dated back to ancient Alexandria, to charts that had been compiled centuries before his time. He was not claiming to have discovered this southern land himself. He was copying from something older. What that source was, no one has ever determined. Mainstream cartographers argue the southern landmass on the Piri Reis Map is simply a speculative drawing or a misplaced South America. They point to legitimate reasons for doubt. The debate is genuine and unresolved. But the question it leaves behind does not close easily. Someone, at some point, may have known what was at the bottom of the world long before any official history records. There's something else that Antarctica does to the world as we understand it. Compasses do not work there. Near the geographic South Pole, Earth's magnetic field lines run nearly vertical, pointing straight down rather than horizontally toward magnetic north. A standard compass, designed to align with horizontal magnetic fields, becomes unreliable, sometimes spinning freely, pointing at nothing useful. Every explorer who has approached the pole knows this. You navigate by GPS, by sun position, by star sighting. The magnetic system that guides every ship, every bird, every organism that uses Earth's field for orientation. It simply stops functioning as expected. There is a region of East Antarctica called the Wilkes Land Anomaly. In the late 1950s, during the first satellite surveys of the continent, instruments detected a massive gravitational anomaly beneath the ice. A circular region roughly 240 kilometers across, where gravity behaves differently than the surrounding rock would predict. The most common scientific explanation is that it represents the buried crater of an ancient meteorite impact. Potentially the largest impact event in Earth's history, larger even than the one that ended the dinosaurs. But no one has ever confirmed it. It remains literally buried under the ice, unreachable with current technology. A circle, 240 kilometers wide, hidden under Antarctica, pulling at the world differently than anything around it. And we have never been able to look directly at it. This is the reality of Antarctica. Not conspiracy, not fabrication. Documented, peer-reviewed, satellite-confirmed reality. A continent with a lake containing life unlike anything else on Earth. A continent with buried mountains that should not exist. A continent with volcanoes that have never seen light. A continent whose ancient shape may have been mapped by a civilization we cannot identify. A continent where the physical laws that guide navigation stop working. A continent sealed under ice for 20 million years, with hundreds of lakes in permanent darkness, connected by rivers that have never touched sunlight. And now, the humans who came looking for answers. Close your eyes a little more. Let the images settle. We are about to go further. 53 million years ago, Antarctica had palm trees. This is not speculation. This is fossil record. In 2012, researchers drilling sediment cores in the Ross Sea found the preserved remains of subtropical vegetation. Plants that require temperatures of over 20 degrees Celsius to survive, buried in layers corresponding to the Eocene epoch, when Antarctica was still connected to the other southern continents and the climate of the polar region was warm enough for a lush, forested landscape. The fossilized forests of Antarctica are not a metaphor for change. They are a physical record of a world so different from the current one that our intuitions about climate and geography fail us entirely when we try to imagine it. And here is what makes this more than just an interesting geological curiosity. The Eocene forests of Antarctica were not a brief anomaly. They persisted for millions of years. Entire ecosystems, insects, reptiles, mammals, birds, lived and evolved and died in a place that is now, in every practical sense, the most hostile surface environment on Earth. Then the climate shifted. The Drake Passage opened between South America and Antarctica as the continents separated, establishing the circumpolar current that isolated the southern pole from the warmth of the tropical oceans. The temperature dropped, the ice built, the forests died, and the continent sealed itself under ice that has not fully lifted in 34 million years. What was buried when the ice came is still there. In 2017, a study published in Nature reported the discovery of a fossil forest in West Antarctica containing preserved tree rings, individual growth rings in fossilized wood, showing a climate that switched from months of continuous sunlight to months of total polar darkness. Trees that had evolved to survive the extreme light cycles of the Antarctic year, thriving in conditions that no modern forest experiences. The tree rings showed periods of rapid growth, followed by periods of near dormancy, a biological rhythm tuned to an environment that no longer exists. The forest is under ice now, but the record of it remains, pressed into stone, waiting under kilometers of frozen water, telling the story of a world that was. And the question that follows naturally, in the silence after you absorb this, is not about the past. It is about the present. What else is under the ice? What other records, what other remains, what other evidence of the long history of this continent, a continent that was once green and warm and alive in ways we can barely reconstruct, is waiting under the ice for technology or circumstance to bring it back to light? There is a part of Antarctica called the dry valleys. In a continent defined by ice, they have almost none. Cold, descending winds, called katabatic winds, sweep down from the polar plateau with such force and such dryness that they evaporate any snow or ice before it can accumulate. The result is exposed rock, frozen soil, and a landscape so barren, so utterly stripped of biological input, that it is the closest approximation of Mars on Earth. NASA has used the dry valleys for decades to test Mars rover technology and to study the limits of terrestrial life as a model for what might, or might not, exist elsewhere in the solar system. In that near-sterile environment, scientists have found life, not everywhere, not abundantly, but present. Microscopic organisms living inside translucent rocks, not on them, inside them, using the rock itself as a greenhouse. sheltering from the wind and cold while absorbing the faint light that filters through the stone above. They are called endolithic microorganisms. They have no access to soil nutrients. They have almost no access to liquid water. They photosynthesize through rock. They are alive. In other areas of the dry valleys, researchers have found microbial mats in shallow lakes, thin, almost invisible communities of cyanobacteria lying on the lake bottom, photosynthesizing during the brief Antarctic summer, dormant for the rest of the year. Some of these mats have been carbon dated to tens of thousands of years old. They grow so slowly that their individual members are effectively immortal on any human timescale. The same mat that a scientist photographs today may contain organisms that were photosynthesizing when the last ice age was ending. And perhaps most remarkable, in the soil of the dry valleys, researchers have found nematodes, tiny roundworms, capable of surviving complete desiccation. They enter a state called cryptobiosis, shutting down all metabolic processes, losing nearly all their water content, and waiting. Not sleeping, not dormant in any meaningful biological sense. Simply paused. They can remain in this state for decades. When water returns, they resume life as if no time has passed. This is not a metaphor for resilience. It is a description of an actual biological mechanism. An organism that can stop being alive in any functional sense, and then start again. This happens in Antarctica. This happens in the dry valleys, which look more like a dead planet than anywhere else on Earth. The lesson Antarctica keeps teaching, in every context it is studied, is the same. Life finds a way to be wherever existence permits it to be, not just where it is comfortable, not just where there is sunlight and warmth and ordinary chemistry, but in the rock, under the ice, in the sealed dark, in the frozen soil of the most hostile environment our planet offers. There is one more thing about Antarctica's reality that belongs in the first act, before the legends begin. In 2016, physicists operating the IceCube Neutrino Observatory at the South Pole recorded something they could not explain. High-energy particles, traveling upward through the Earth, rather, than downward from space, with energy signatures that exceeded the theoretical maximum for particles interacting with ordinary matter, over the distance they would have had to travel to emerge from that direction. This result was published in peer-reviewed journals. It has been replicated. It has been studied for years. It does not go away. The technical name for the threshold it exceeded is the Greisen-Zatsepin-Kuzmin limit, a ceiling on particle energy derived from interactions with the cosmic microwave background radiation that permeates all of space. A particle with more energy than this limit should not be able to travel far without losing energy to that background field. The IceCube signal exceeded it, coming from below. The researchers who published the findings were careful. They noted possible explanations involving new physics, instrumental artifacts, unmodeled atmospheric interactions. They did not claim to have found something impossible. They claimed to have found something that their current models do not account for. This is Antarctica's contribution to fundamental physics, a signal from beneath the ice of the most remote continent on Earth, traveling the wrong direction through a particle detector buried a kilometer below the surface, with energy that our best current theories say should not be possible. It is not a mystery of legends. It is not a mystery of conspiracy. It is a mystery of physics. And it is here, at the bottom of the world, right now, waiting for a theory large enough to contain it. Act 2. Legends. In August of 1946, 1 year after the end of the Second World War, the United States Navy announced the largest peacetime military expedition in American history. Its destination, Antarctica. The scale was extraordinary. 4,700 personnel, 13 ships, including a submarine and a full aircraft carrier, the USS Philippine Sea, 33 aircraft. The mission was officially named Operation Highjump, and its stated objectives were straightforward. Establish a research base, test equipment in polar conditions, train personnel for extreme cold operations, and conduct aerial mapping. The expedition was expected to last 6 to 8 months. It lasted 2.5. On February 28, 1947, the fleet turned around and came home. The official reason given was bad weather and advancing winter. Some participants later described the mission as disorganized, poorly planned, unclear in its objectives. One pilot who flew aerial survey missions admitted simply, "We didn't really know what we were doing." 4,700 people, an aircraft carrier, a submarine, and they left after 68 days. What had been budgeted as a half-year scientific mission ended before spring. Shortly after returning, Admiral Richard Byrd, the most famous polar explorer in American history, a man who had been to Antarctica 4 times, a decorated naval officer whose word carried enormous institutional weight, gave a series of interviews. In one, speaking to a Chilean newspaper, he made a statement that has never been satisfactorily explained by official sources. He said in summary, "The era in which America could rely on its geographic isolation for safety was over. That an enemy, he did not specify which, had demonstrated the capability to fly from pole to pole without refueling, that the United States needed to take seriously what had been encountered." Read that again, slowly. An enemy, flying from pole to pole, without refueling. In 1947, no aircraft in the world had that range. The technology did not exist. Not for the United States, not for the Soviet Union, not for any known nation. Byrd knew this better than almost anyone alive. He had spent his career in polar aviation. He understood precisely what was and was not possible in the air above the ice. And yet, he said it publicly, on the record, to a foreign press. Then he went quiet. Byrd died in 1957. His official expedition diary is a matter of public record. The full account of what his forces encountered in the southern polar region in those 68 days has never been comprehensively declassified. The interviews he gave in the months after the mission were not followed up by any official inquiry. No journalist pressed him. No congressional committee called him to testify. A man of his stature speaking those words was simply allowed to fade from the conversation. What he saw in those 68 days, what convinced a 4-time Antarctic veteran to speak in terms of existential threat to national security, is not in any public document. It remains, like so much else about Antarctica, sealed. What is on record? The expedition mapped over 1.5 million square miles of Antarctic coastline. They photographed over 70,000 images. They detected the presence of large coal deposits. 3 aircraft crashed. 8 men died. And then they came home early, and Byrd spoke about enemies flying pole to pole, and then no one asked him about it in public again. In December of 1938, the German cargo ship MS Schwabenland left Hamburg for Antarctica. It was not a scientific vessel. It was a catapult ship, designed to launch aircraft from its deck using a compressed air catapult. On this expedition, it carried 2 large Dornier flying boats equipped for aerial survey work. The expedition was organized by the Nazi government. Its official purpose, to Find a location suitable for a German whaling station in Antarctic waters. Germany needed whale oil for industrial production, and Norwegian whalers controlled most of the existing operations. What actually happened during the 5 weeks the Schwabenland was in the region of what is now called Queen Maud Land is both documented and disputed. What is confirmed? German aircraft flew extensive survey missions across a section of Antarctica roughly the size of Germany itself. On every flight, they dropped metal markers, darts engraved with a Nazi swastika, onto the ice below. The Germans claimed the territory. They named it Neuschwabenland, New Swabia. The expedition returned in April of 1939. 5 months later, the war began. During the final years of the war and in its immediate aftermath, rumors emerged from captured German documents and prisoner interrogations that the Nazis had done something more than plant flags in Queen Maud Land, that they had located and begun developing an ice-free region, a network of geothermal caves warmed by underground volcanic heat, and had established, or at minimum planned, a permanent facility there. No physical evidence of such a facility has ever been officially confirmed. But geothermal activity in Queen Maud Land is not fabricated. The region sits above known volcanic structures. Ice-free zones, called oases, do exist in Antarctica, where geothermal heat prevents accumulation. The caves and tunnels that form in volcanic ice regions are real, documented geological features. What is indisputable? A major Nazi expedition claimed a large section of Antarctica less than a year before the war. The details of what that expedition found, beyond the aerial survey data, were never fully made public. And 1 year after the war ended, the United States sent the largest military force ever assembled for a polar mission, to a location in Antarctica not entirely dissimilar from the region Germany had claimed. Whether there is a connection between these facts, or whether the timing is coincidence, is a question that official history has largely declined to answer directly. On December 1st, 1959, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty. The signatories included the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, France, Australia, Norway, Argentina, Chile, Belgium, Japan, New Zealand, and South Africa. In the context of the Cold War, when these same nations were engaged in profound ideological conflict on nearly every other front, they agreed, unanimously, on the following. Antarctica would be used exclusively for peaceful scientific purposes. No military activity, no weapons testing, no nuclear explosions, no disposal of radioactive waste, no new territorial claims, all existing territorial claims frozen in place, neither recognized nor rejected. The treaty has been honored without significant violation for over 60 years. It has been expanded and strengthened. Today, over 50 nations are party to it. The remarkable thing is not the treaty itself. The remarkable thing is the timing. In 1959, the space race was beginning. Nuclear weapons testing was escalating. The United States and Soviet Union were building military bases on every accessible strategic point on the globe. And yet, Antarctica, a continent whose strategic position gives whoever controls it command of approach routes to both major oceans, access to potentially vast mineral and energy resources, and the only landmass positioned equidistantly from every inhabited continent, was declared, by unanimous agreement, off-limits to all of it. Why? What did the nations that had sent expeditions to Antarctica in the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s, including the largest military expedition in polar history, decide collectively that it was better not to pursue there? One documented answer. The continent is scientifically invaluable, and its Preservation for peaceful research serves humanity better than militarization. This is reasonable. This is also perhaps incomplete. 12 nations. 1 year of negotiation. Perfect unanimity on the one continent no individual nation was willing to give up competing for. And yet, somehow did, all at once, together. It is the kind of agreement that is easier to explain if everyone at the table had seen something that made competition seem inadvisable. In 1911, the geologist Griffith Taylor was exploring a glacier in the dry valleys of Antarctica when he saw something that made no sense. From a fissure in the ice, a dark red liquid was flowing. Slowly, like blood seeping from a wound. He assumed it was red algae. The environment was too hostile for anything else. He named it Blood Falls and moved on. For a century, that explanation stood. In 2017, researchers finally analyzed the source in detail. Blood Falls is not algae. It is iron-rich salt water emerging from a reservoir trapped beneath the glacier. Salt water so salty, so concentrated, that it remains liquid at temperatures where ordinary water would freeze solid. When it hits the air and oxidizes, the iron in it turns red. The reservoir that feeds it has been sealed under the glacier for an estimated 1.5 million years. And when scientists analyzed the microbial life living in that reservoir, they found an ecosystem that had developed in complete isolation for all that time. Organisms that had learned to survive by cycling sulfur and iron through their metabolism instead of oxygen. A closed biological loop, feeding on chemistry alone, with no sunlight, no connection to the world above, for longer than the entirety of human civilization, multiplied by a factor of 600. They were alive. They are still alive now. In the dry valleys near Blood Falls, researchers have also found the desiccated remains of seals, lying dozens of kilometers from the ocean, at elevations thousands of meters above sea level. Carbon dating places some of them at over 2,000 years old. No one has fully explained what drives seals this far inland, this far up, against every instinct of their biology. Some researchers believe they lose their sense of direction, that some failure of orientation pulls them away from the sea and into the interior where they cannot return. Others note that it is worth remembering. These are the dry valleys, the most Mars-like environment on Earth. The valleys where NASA has tested Mars rover technology, the environment closest on this planet to the conditions that scientists study when they ask whether life could persist on other worlds. The seals go there and die, and their bodies are preserved for thousands of years. And the question of what draws them there has no complete answer. In 2016, researchers operating sensitive particle detectors at the South Pole made an announcement that generated significant attention in physics journals and almost none in mainstream media. The IceCube Neutrino Observatory, a detector array buried deep in the Antarctic ice, designed to catch subatomic particles that pass through the Earth from space, had registered an anomalous signal. A high-energy particle had arrived from a direction that should have been impossible, from below, from inside the Earth, moving upward through the planet rather than down through space. The standard explanation is that cosmic rays, traveling through the Earth from above, can sometimes produce particles that appear to travel in the wrong direction through a detector. This is known. This is expected. The IceCube signal did not match that explanation. Its energy levels were too high. The angle was wrong. Multiple analyses over subsequent years have confirmed that the signal exists, that it is real, and that it does not fit cleanly within the current standard model of particle physics. The researchers named it the Antarctic anomaly. They noted it cautiously in papers. They proposed various conventional explanations, new physics, unmodeled cosmic ray interactions, detector artifacts. and acknowledged that none of them completely accounted for what the data showed. In 2021, a follow-up paper reconfirmed the anomaly. The signal is still there. Something comes up from beneath the Antarctic ice that current physics cannot fully explain. What it is, and where exactly it originates, remains open. This is the record, partial, incomplete, officially acknowledged, of what humans have found when they went to Antarctica looking for answers. In every case, the answer pointed somewhere further, beneath the ice, into the dark. You are breathing slowly now. The cold is not uncomfortable. It is ancient. It is patient. And we still have one more place to go. There is a specific kind of human experience that Antarctica produces that is unlike anything else on Earth. It is called wintering over. Each year, as the Antarctic summer ends and the last supply planes depart before the continent becomes completely inaccessible, a small number of researchers remain. At the American Amundsen Scott South Pole Station, built directly above the geographic South Pole, roughly 40 to 50 people stay through the Antarctic winter. At other stations around the continent, similar numbers. For approximately 8 months, they are completely unreachable. If there is a medical emergency, there is no evacuation. The aircraft that could reach them cannot fly in the dark and cold of Antarctic winter. If there is a mechanical failure, help cannot come. They are, in the most literal sense, on their own. The sun sets in March. It does not rise again until September. For those 8 months, the outside temperatures average minus 60 degrees Celsius. Winds regularly exceed 100 kilometers per hour. The station machinery, the life support, the heating, the power generation, runs continuously, because stopping it would mean death. The people who winter over experience something that has been studied extensively by psychologists and neurologists because of its relevance to long-duration spaceflight. What happens to the human mind when it is removed from all ordinary social and environmental inputs for extended periods? Some of what happens is predictable. Depression, irritability, sleep disruption from the absence of sunlight, difficulty concentrating, the phenomenon called the Antarctic stare, a vacant, unfocused gaze that winter-over personnel develop, a look that those who have seen it describe as the look of a mind turned inward because there is nothing outside worth focusing on. But some of what happens is less predictable. Many winter-over veterans describe a quality of inner clarity that they have never experienced elsewhere. A stripping away of distraction so complete that the mind begins to process things it has been postponing for years. Dreams become vivid and strange. Relationships among the small group intensify dramatically, both positive and negative. Some people discover capacities for solitude and self-sufficiency that they did not know they possessed. And a significant number describe something that is harder to categorize, a sense of the ancient scale of what surrounds them. Not a frightening sense, a clarifying one. At the South Pole in winter, you are standing in the dark at the axis of the Earth's rotation, surrounded by a silence that, when the wind drops, is so complete that you can hear your own heartbeat. The nearest other human beings are at another research station, hundreds of kilometers away. The nearest city is on another continent, and you are standing on top of kilometers of ice that has been accumulating for 30 million years. This does something to the sense of time. Several winter-over researchers have described it in similar terms. A sudden visceral understanding that the human timescale, decades, centuries, even millennia, is a thin surface layer on top of an incomprehensibly deeper reality. That the ordinary urgencies of life, the deadlines and the worries and the plans, are real but not ultimate. That something older and larger than any of it is simply, continuously there. This experience is not available everywhere. Antarctica offers it specifically and only to those willing to winter over. And perhaps this is another thing the continent guards. Not just physical secrets under the ice, but a quality of perspective that can only be reached by going to the edge of the ordinary world and staying there. There is a moment that conspiracy theorists and official historians have been arguing about for 70 years. It is a sentence, or rather, a series of sentences, spoken by Admiral Richard Byrd in an interview given to a Chilean newspaper, El Mercurio, shortly after Operation Highjump ended. The interview exists. The newspaper exists. The quotes have been translated and retranslated and debated for decades. Byrd said, and here we are presenting what has been reported, not confirmed official record, that the United States could no longer rely on geographic isolation for its protection. That there was a threat capable of flying from pole to pole at speeds that made conventional defense obsolete. That the American public needed to understand the world had become, in a fundamental sense, different. He did not say what the threat was. He did not say where it came from. He said what he said, and then the interview ended, and the official record moves on without addressing it. Now, here is where we need to be honest about what we know and what we are doing. The conspiracy version of this story, the one that fills entire books and YouTube channels, says that Byrd encountered advanced Nazi aircraft operating from a secret Antarctic base, that his fleet suffered combat losses against flying saucer technology, and that the whole of Operation Highjump was a military engagement disguised as a research mission. None of that has been confirmed by any official source. What is confirmed? Operation Highjump ended early. Byrd gave a strange interview. Several aircraft were lost, officially attributed to crashes and weather, and the entire classified record of the mission has never been fully released. This is the specific kind of territory where the imagination fills what the record withholds. Maybe Byrd was speaking metaphorically about Soviet air power and the speed of modern warfare. Maybe he was warning about long-range bomber capability in the context of early Cold War anxiety. These are the official interpretations, and they are reasonable. But he had just returned from Antarctica, and he was speaking about threats that could fly pole to pole. And the mission he had led ended 2.5 months early with no complete public explanation. We cannot tell you what happened. What we can tell you is that the gap between what is known and what is explained is real. It is documented, and it has not closed in 75 years. Consider for a moment what the Antarctic Treaty actually says. No military activity of any kind, no weapons testing, no nuclear material, no new territorial claims. All scientific research to be shared openly among nations. Free access for observers from any signatory nation to inspect any facility on the continent at any time, without advance notice. This last point is remarkable. In 1959, at the height of the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union, nations that were pointing nuclear weapons at each other across 2 oceans, agreed that each could send uninvited inspectors to the other's Antarctic research stations without warning at any time. This kind of transparency did not exist anywhere else on Earth. Not then. Not for decades afterward. Why Antarctica? Why this level of mutual openness for this one continent, while every other strategic location on Earth was subject to the usual apparatus of secrecy and territorial defense? The official answer, again, is reasonable. Antarctica has unique scientific value. It is politically neutral territory claimed by 7 nations with overlapping and conflicting claims. Internationalizing it removes a potential flashpoint. The precedent of open scientific cooperation established there could model international behavior more broadly. All true, all logical. And yet, the nations that signed that treaty had all sent expeditions to Antarctica in the preceding 2 decades. The United States had sent the largest military expedition in polar history. The Soviet Union had its own extensive Antarctic research program. The British, the Norwegians, the Australians, all had spent significant resources exploring the continent. What did all of them find that made them decide, together and unanimously, that Antarctica should be a different kind of place? We are not claiming they found something extraordinary. We are asking the question that the record does not definitively answer. Because here is what we know for certain. 12 nations that could not agree on almost anything else in 1959 agreed on this. Completely. Without significant negotiation drama. In 1 year. Something made Antarctica feel, to all of them at once, like a place worth treating differently. What that something was, whether it was simply the logic of scientific cooperation or whether it was something more, is a question the treaty itself does not answer. And that unanswered question is, depending on your view, either a minor historical curiosity or one of the most interesting gaps in 20th century public record. Act 3. Philosophy. There is a particular quality to the darkness under the Antarctic ice that is unlike any other darkness on Earth. And it begins with the understanding that this darkness is not empty, but full. Full of water that has been liquid for 20 million years without ever touching light. Full of organisms that have been alive and evolving and adapting and finding their way through that lightless water for longer than our entire genus has walked the surface of this planet. Full of pressure and chemistry and slow biological intelligence that has solved the problem of existence without any of the tools that life on the surface takes for granted. And the strange thing, the thing that stays with you when you really let it in, is that this darkness is not frightening, but extraordinarily peaceful. Because it is a darkness that has never been interrupted. A darkness that has never been broken by the anxiety of a world that knows it is being watched. A darkness that simply is what it is. Ancient, complete, and entirely indifferent to whether anyone will ever reach it. The ice above that darkness is 4 kilometers thick in places, and the ice itself is memory in the most literal sense. Layered memory of 800,000 years of atmosphere, of volcanic eruptions that happened before any human was alive to see them, of climate cycles that rose and fell across geological time, of the slow breathing of a planet that has been doing what it does long before consciousness arrived to observe it, and that will continue long after consciousness has moved on to other questions. When you understand this, truly understand it, not as a fact to be filed away, but as a reality to be inhabited for a moment, something in the ordinary urgency of daily life becomes quieter, not because the urgency is wrong or unimportant, but because it finds its proper scale. The scale of a creature that has been on this earth for a brief and luminous moment. And that is right now, at this particular moment, alive and breathing and present at the edge of the last mystery the planet holds. Long before the first human set foot on any continent, Antarctica was already ancient. When our ancestors were learning to control fire, the East Antarctic ice sheet had already been frozen for 33 million years. When the first cities were being built in Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, The sealed lakes beneath the ice were already in their 20th million year of isolation, already evolving their strange and nameless life, already accumulating the chemical signatures of a world that had no connection to the surface, no knowledge of the civilizations forming above, no relationship to anything that was happening in the ordinary world of sunlight and seasons and the movement of people across landscapes. And the remarkable thing is not that this parallel existence was unknown to the ancient world. Of course it was unknown. It was under 4 kilometers of ice. But that the ancient world nonetheless pointed at it correctly. That Aristotle, sitting in Athens in the 4th century before the Common Era, looked at a sphere and reasoned that there must be weight at the bottom to balance the weight at the top. That he named the unknown southern land Antarctos, and drew the logical conclusion that geometry demanded a continent there, and that he was right, and that the continent he correctly predicted was more extraordinary than any prediction he could have made about what it contained. There is something in this that is worth sitting with as you settle towards sleep. The recognition that intelligence and intuition and careful reasoning can point at truths that are far beyond the horizon of direct experience. That the ancient impulse to look at the world and ask what must be there, even when you cannot see it, is not a failure of rationality, but one of its highest expressions, and that this impulse is still alive in you, is in fact part of what brought you here tonight. What made you curious enough about the bottom of the world to let someone take you there in the dark hours before sleep? The sky above Antarctica in winter is a darkness so complete and so clear that it becomes something different from ordinary night sky. It becomes the universe itself, visible in a way that is almost never available to human eyes, because Antarctica sits in the one place on Earth where the atmosphere is thinnest and driest and least disturbed by heat rising from vegetation or cities or the ordinary warmth of inhabited land. Researchers who winter over at the South Pole describe the winter sky as something that changes them, not in a dramatic or sudden way, but in the slow and cumulative way that all profound encounters change people, gradually and mostly without their realizing it, until one day they notice that their sense of scale has shifted, that the things which seemed urgent in the ordinary world have reorganized themselves into something more accurate, that they have acquired a perspective that most people spend their whole lives unable to reach because they are never far enough from the light. And what they describe seeing, when the sky is clear and the wind has dropped and the temperature is 60 degrees below zero and the silence is so complete that you can hear your own heartbeat, is not frightening, but beautiful in the specific way that things are beautiful when they are completely themselves. Not performing, not accommodating, not arranged for any human comfort or convenience, but simply existing at their full scale and in their full nature. The Milky Way from the South Pole is not a smear of light across the sky, but a structure, a genuine three-dimensional structure of 100 billion stars, visible as such for the first time, organized into arms and clouds and concentrations that the Antarctic air reveals the way cold water reveals the true color of a stone. And below that sky, the ice stretches to every horizon, pale and blue and featureless and enormously patient, holding its secrets at a depth that no starlight reaches, sealing its lakes and its nameless bacteria and its sealed volcanic heat in the same darkness that has always been there and will continue to be there long after everyone who has ever looked up at that sky is gone. The ice keeps everything. This is not a metaphor, and it is not consolation. It is a statement about the actual physics of frozen water, which preserves organic material with an efficiency that nothing else on Earth can match, which locks air bubbles in their original chemical state for hundreds of thousands of years, which holds the compressed record of every climate shift and every volcanic winter and every cosmic event that left its signature in the atmosphere during the long history of the planet's frozen south. When scientists drill ice, cores from the deep Antarctic ice sheet, and bring them to the surface, they are doing something that has no real parallel in any other kind of scientific work. They are reaching back through time and retrieving the actual physical substance of a past that would otherwise be entirely inaccessible. Not a record of that past, not a representation of it, but the thing itself. The air that was breathed before our species existed. The chemical fingerprint of a volcanic eruption that happened when the continents were in slightly different positions. The isotopic signature of a cosmic event that altered the upper atmosphere of the Earth 800,000 years ago. And the ice does this not because it was designed to. Ice has no intentions, no archival purpose, no awareness of what it is preserving, but simply because it is what it is. Cold and patient and continuous, accumulating layer by layer across time scales that make human history look like an afternoon. The ice keeps everything because that is what ice does when it falls and does not melt and falls again. And in doing so, it has created the most complete record of this planet's atmospheric past that exists anywhere. A record that scientists have barely begun to read, that extends deeper than any drill has yet reached, that continues downward through the rock beneath the ice into a geological history that makes the ice itself seem recent. Under the ice, in the sealed lakes, in the lightless rivers that connect them, in the thin films of water that exist at the boundary between ice and stone. There is life that has been alive for so long that the concept of its age loses meaning somewhere in the middle of the second sentence that tries to describe it. 20 million years is a number that the mind can read without understanding, the way you can read the distance to a star in light years without actually feeling what that distance means in the body. It is a number too large for the ordinary human sense of time to hold. And the organisms that have been alive in Lake Vostok for that duration have not experienced time the way we experience it, have not accumulated memories or histories or the weight of days, but have simply continued the chemical process of being alive through an unbroken chain of generation and metabolism and adaptation that stretches back to a world where the continent above them was covered in forest, and the Antarctic sky was not the winter darkness it is now, but the warm and complicated sky of a temperate land. And they are still doing it right now, as you breathe, as your body relaxes toward sleep, as the ordinary world outside your window continues its ordinary business, somewhere under 4 kilometers of Antarctic ice, in water that has been liquid and sealed for longer than our genus has existed. Organisms that have no name in any human language are continuing the chemical conversation with their environment that constitutes being alive, and they are doing it in complete darkness, in complete silence, with no knowledge of the world above them and no need for any. This is what the ice keeps beneath itself in the living dark. And it is more extraordinary, in a quiet and unhurried way, than almost anything else on this earth. There is a particular freedom that comes from truly accepting that some things cannot be known. And Antarctica offers this freedom in a form that is unusually pure and unusually honest. Because the things Antarctica keeps from us are not hidden by anyone. They are not classified, not suppressed, not deliberately withheld. They are simply under the ice, and the ice is 4 kilometers thick, and the technology to look through it directly does not yet exist. And this is not a conspiracy, but a fact of physics. And the facts of physics are not enemies of understanding, but the honest boundary conditions within which understanding operates. What Antarctica cannot be reached through. What the ice resists, not from stubbornness, but from simple density, is the kind of knowing that requires direct contact. The kind that comes from standing in a place and seeing it with your own eyes, and breathing its air, and feeling its temperature, and having the immediate physical experience of presence that no instrument can fully replicate. That kind of knowing is not available for the interior of Antarctica. It may not be available in any lifetime that is currently being lived. And the choice that this unavailability presents is the same choice that every genuine mystery presents. You can experience it as frustrating, as a gap in the map that should be filled, as a problem requiring solution, or you can experience it as what it actually is, which is a reminder that the world is larger than your knowledge of it and always will be, that there will always be more depth than you can reach, that mystery is not the absence of knowledge, but the presence of something that knowledge has not yet learned to hold. Antarctica is the Earth's way of keeping that reminder available in physical form. A continent-sized space where the ordinary instruments of human understanding reach their current limit, and the world continues beyond them, quietly and without apology, into a depth that has been there longer than we have, and will be there long after we have learned whatever we are going to learn about it. Geologists have documented that Antarctica breathes, not metaphorically, but in a literal physical sense, that the ice sheet expands and contracts with the seasons, that the subglacial water moves and shifts under the pressure of ice that accumulates and calves, that the volcanic heat beneath the western ice sheet creates a warmth at the base of the glaciers that keeps the boundary between ice and rock liquid and moving, that the whole vast, frozen system is dynamic in ways that only became visible when satellite technology gave scientists the perspective to see the whole continent at once. And as you let yourself become still, as your breath deepens and your body releases the held tension of a day that is now behind you, it is possible to feel something of that continental scale in your own breath. The way breathing is also an expansion and contraction, a movement of warm and cold, an exchange between the interior of a system and the world outside it, a process that continues while you sleep, just as the Antarctic ice continues its slow breathing while the researchers at the surface station sleep. The ice does not pause. The lakes do not pause. The bacteria in the sealed water do not pause their 20 million year process of being alive. The volcanic heat does not pause. The slow movement of ice from the polar plateau toward the coast does not pause. Everything continues in its own rhythm, at its own scale, according to the rules of its own nature, and the fact that you are about to enter the unconscious state of sleep does not interrupt any of it, because none of it requires your awareness in order to proceed. This is one of the most genuinely restful thoughts available to a human mind, that the world runs without you when you are not watching it. That your sleep is not an absence of reality, but simply the portion of reality that you experience from the inside rather than the outside. That everything will continue and everything will be there when you return to waking. And that your rest is as valid and as necessary as any other process in the system that holds you. Let the ice come around you now, not as cold, but as stillness. The ancient stillness of 34 million years of accumulation, of layer upon layer of compressed time, of a world that has been doing what it does without interruption for longer than our category of time can hold. You are warm. You are safe. You are lying in the one place on Earth where you are exactly as you are, without the need to be anything else. And the ice of Antarctica is at the bottom of the world doing what it has always done. And the lakes beneath it are alive in the dark the way they have always been alive. And the sky above the South Pole is full of stars that have been burning since before the continent existed. And all of this is true at the same moment and in the same world that contains you right now. Breathing slowly, releasing the day. letting the ordinary weight of thought soften and dissolve into something quieter and older and more patient than thought. The continent has been sealed for 34 million years, and it does not need to be opened tonight. The mystery has been waiting for all of human history, and it does not need to be solved tonight. The particle signal from beneath the ice has been arriving at the detector for years, and it does not need to be explained tonight. Everything is in its place, and everything can wait, and the only thing that needs to happen right now is the thing that is already happening. Your body growing heavier, your breath growing slower, the boundary between the waking world and the sleeping world becoming softer and more permeable with every breath you take. The ice is patient. The lakes are patient. The ancient bacteria in the sealed dark water are patient with a patience that makes all human patience look brief. And you can borrow some of that patience right now. Let it come into you with the breath. Let it settle through you the way cold settles through ice. Slowly, completely, without resistance, until the world above and the world below and the world inside you are all the same depth of quiet, all the same temperature of stillness, all the same darkness of rest. Sleep now. The last continent is at the bottom of the world, and it will be there in the morning, still sealed, still ancient, still full of everything it keeps. And you will be here too, having traveled to the edge of the last mystery and returned, as everyone who sleeps returns. Changed in ways too quiet to name, rested in ways too deep to measure, having been, for a few hours, as still as the ice itself. Sleep now. The world is patient. And so are you. There is a philosophical tradition present in multiple cultures, multiple eras, that holds that the most important truths are the ones that cannot be reached by ordinary means, not because they are hidden by anyone, not because they are being withheld, but because they are, by their nature, beyond the ordinary instruments of perception. The ancient Neoplatonists spoke of the One, a reality so fundamental, so underlying everything, that it could not be described, only approached. The Tao of Chinese philosophy is defined in its opening line as the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. Negative theology, the apophatic tradition in Christian mysticism, holds that God can only be described by what God is not, because any positive description would limit something that is by definition unlimited. These traditions were not being vague. They were pointing at something real. There are aspects of reality that resist direct examination, not because they are small or unimportant, but because they are so fundamental, so large, that our ordinary instruments, our senses, our measurements, our conceptual categories cannot hold them cleanly. Antarctica points at this. The ice itself resists. Everything under it resists. The particle signal that arrives from below the Earth that does not fit the standard model of physics. It does not resist out of stubbornness. It resists because our model is not yet large enough to contain it. The unnamed bacterium in Lake Vostok does not resist being classified. It simply hasn't been classified yet because our classification systems were built for life that developed in connection with the surface world, and this life did not. The Arge, gravitational anomaly under the ice, does not resist being explained. It simply hasn't been explained yet because we cannot reach it directly, and indirect explanation has its limits. These are not mystical claims. They are observations about the relationship between the tools of human understanding and the depth of what there is to understand. The tools are good. They are extraordinarily good. But they are not infinite. And Antarctica, the last blank space, the sealed continent, the place that compasses fail and ancient particles arrive and life persists without sunlight for 20 million years. Antarctica is one of the places on Earth where the tools run out before the reality does. This is not something to grieve. It is something to rest in. You have traveled far tonight, farther than the miles would suggest. You have been to the place where the maps end, where the physics hesitates, where life found a way in the total dark for longer than our minds can easily hold. And you are still here, still breathing, still warm. This is its own kind of miracle. You are an organism that evolved in the light, designed for warmth and motion and the ordinary commerce of the surface world. And yet tonight, you have been in the dark below the ice, in the sealed lakes, in the dry valleys where nothing should live, but things live anyway. You carried all of this inside you without knowing it. The curiosity, the reach, the willingness to go to the bottom of the world and ask what is there. This is what we are, underneath everything. Creatures that lean toward the unknown, that point themselves toward the edge of what is understood and ask what is beyond. Even at rest, even in sleep, especially in sleep, because sleep is its own sealed lake, dark, deep, alive in ways we cannot easily see. Every night, without permission, without instruments, without official clearance, you go there. And every morning, you return, changed in ways you often cannot name. This is the last thing Antarctica teaches, that the deepest exploration does not always require a ship, that the last blank space is not only at the bottom of the world, it is in you. It has always been in you. Sleep well. The ice is patient. And so, tonight, are you. Every other secret on Earth has a shape. We know what is in the Mariana Trench. We have photographs, samples, maps. We have explored the Amazon Basin, the Sahara, the Arctic Ocean. We have satellites that can resolve individual cars on city streets. We have sonar that has mapped the ocean floor. The secrets that remain on Earth are mostly the secrets of detail. The undiscovered species, the unnamed archaeological sites, the unexcavated ruins, the species we have not yet described. Antarctica's secret is different in kind. It is not a secret of detail. It is a secret of structure. We do not know what is under 4 kilometers of ice that has been sealed for 30 million years. Not specifically. Not in the way we know the rest of the planet's surface. The technology that allows us to see through the ice gives us shapes, gravitational signatures, thermal readings, but not direct observation, not touch, not the kind of knowledge that comes from standing in a place and looking at it with your own eyes. The last secret of this planet is geological. It is physical. It is a continent-sized question written in ice, and the answer is underneath. And we have not yet found a way to read it directly. This matters because of what it means about our relationship to the world we live on. We inhabit a planet. We have done so for a few 100,000 years in anatomically modern form. In that time, we have explored every surface, named every mountain range, mapped every river. We have sent instruments to the bottom of the ocean and to the far edge of the solar system. And there is still a continent, large, physically accessible, not mythological, not metaphorical, whose interior we have not seen. 34 million years of ice. Under it, mountains that may have no explanation that fits current geology. Lakes that may contain life forms with no equivalent elsewhere on Earth. A gravitational anomaly 240 kilometers wide with no confirmed cause. Volcanic systems that have been active for longer than our species has walked. And a particle signal from somewhere beneath it all, arriving at the surface pointing the wrong direction, with energy levels that the standard model of physics does not account for. This is the last secret of the planet. Not a metaphor, not a spiritual exercise, a literal, physical, documented reality. And it is here, on this Earth, right now, waiting under the ice. there is something particular that happens when you truly absorb the fact that Antarctica exists. Not the travel brochure version, penguins, icebergs, the blue light of glaciers. The actual fact. A continent larger than Europe. Frozen for 30 million years. Containing more fresh water than all the world's rivers combined. Sitting at the bottom of the world, sealed, quiet. With 400 lakes in permanent darkness and a particle detector at its pole registering things that physics does not fully explain. This exists right now. While you are reading this, while you breathe, while the ordinary world goes on with its ordinary business. At the bottom of the world, something is happening that we do not understand. And the response to that fact, the emotional, psychological response, is a choice. One response is anxiety, the sense that what is hidden might be dangerous, that governments are concealing something that the public should know, that the ordinary world is a surface over a depth that, if revealed, would change everything. That response is available. It is common. It is, in many ways, the dominant narrative around Antarctica in popular culture. But there is another response. The response that scientists who spend their careers studying the continent describe most consistently is not anxiety. It is awe. The physicists who detected the ice cube anomaly did not describe dread. They described the particular excitement of encountering something that their models could not contain. The specific joy of a world larger than your current understanding of it. The glaciologists who drilled through to Lake Vostok and found bacteria that matched no known species did not describe fear. They described the extraordinary privilege of being the first humans to make contact with life that had been evolving in complete isolation for 20 million years. The researchers who winter over and describe the Antarctic stare, that inward-turned gaze that comes from months of solitude at the axis of the world, do not on the whole describe what they found inside as terrifying. They describe it as clarifying. The last secret of the planet is not a threat. It is an invitation to hold the world as something larger than our knowledge of it. To treat mystery not as a problem requiring solution, but as a reality requiring presence. To live, however briefly, with a genuine recognition that the place you inhabit is deeper, stranger, more alive in its hidden places than the ordinary surface suggests. Antarctica is there right now. 4 kilometers of ice, sealed lakes, mountains no one has touched, a particle arriving from below. And you are here, also alive, also deeper than you appear. That is enough to sleep on tonight. Antarctica has no native people. In all of human history, for the hundreds of thousands of years that our species has walked this earth and found its way to every inhabitable corner of every continent. No one ever lived in Antarctica. No indigenous culture, no ancient settlement, no ruins to excavate. It was the last continent reached by humans, and when we reached it, we found it empty. And yet, it had been there all along, sitting at the bottom of the world, accumulating ice, sealing its lakes, evolving its strange life in the dark, entirely indifferent to whether we knew about it or not. This is the quality that Antarctica, more than any other place on Earth, holds in full concentration. The world does not need us to witness it in order to exist. The mountains under the ice are real, whether or not we have seen them. The bacteria in Lake Vostok are alive, whether or not we have named them. The particle signal is real, whether or not we have explained it. The world is here, fully, enormously, mysteriously here. And we are its most recent visitors, standing at the edge of an ice shelf, pointing instruments at what we cannot directly see, and finding, every time, that the depth exceeds our reach. This is not a failure. This is the condition of being alive on a planet with secrets. Sleep now. The continent is patient. It has been patient for 34 million years. It can wait one more night.